Hello, and welcome. I should have been a pair of ragged claws, scuttling across the floors of silent seas. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown. That's a love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. I think I read that when I was around 13 years old. It was the first piece of poetry I ever read. It made me cry when I read it. And today it seems it's a case of beauty of words lost. Your language has been replaced by text speech and condensed retorts of 100 words or less on social media. And everything, it just seems all funneled into a vacuum of negativity. And since the more social media encroaches, it seems the smaller people's worlds become. Me, I feel like Rip Van Winkle. I fell asleep under a tree. It only feels like I blinked. I woke up from a bad night's sleep, and I woke up to all of this. But I'm not signed in. I'm offline. Mostly because I'm terrible with technology, and because I have zero patience, and I tend to stick with what I know. I stick with what's familiar, but it took me a long time to find a healthy familiar. I was lost, like a lot of young boys. I remember I used to smuggle poetry and novels from school or the library back to home. I used to hide them. I didn't want the other boys to see. For me, it used to be a means of escape. I used to read like Herman Melville. I'd rather dine with a sober cannibal than a drunken Christian. Or Comrade's Heart of Darkness. Sadness flies on the wings of the morning, and out of the heart of darkness comes the light. Because I found hope in words. They proved to me that there was more to life. Because I knew there had to be something at a deeper level. Something more than just throwing hands or getting up to mischief. And just being a bad lad on a road to nowhere. I mean, it's the same reason you're listening to this video right now. You've pulled back the curtain and now there's no one seeing it. Now, they can take everything from you. But what they can't take is that little piece of grey matter between your ears. That's yours. And it took me a long time to figure out that that's a key. Because self-awareness, it didn't come easy. Now, I fought it every step of the way. I mean, I raged at the world when I was a kid. Sometimes the world knew all about it, but most of the time it didn't. But I held on to anger and I acted out and I let it eat me alive. It's like they say, you are not your khakis. You are not a unique snowflake. And you are not your mistakes, and you are not your regrets. And you can allow yourself regrets, but not guilt. Just take it as a lesson learned. Take it and move on. Because men, they need to stop apologizing. Because there's no need. Because they're unworthy of your time and your energy. And it's an old adage, but it's true, you are the prize. Because you're the only prize that matters. And sometimes I feel like the guy in the lighthouse, on a distant shore staring out across a black ocean. But the thought, it becomes too comfortable. Now, I don't want walls around me. Walls of negativity and doubt hedging me in. Now, I want to understand and identify the things that are important to me. I mean, could you imagine going through life only trying to make other people happy? I mean, that has to be a special little pocket of hell. And do you ever wonder how you may have turned out? If you went a different way? Now, because I was lucky. I had mentors enter my life at critical points. And it was a credit to them that I managed to turn things around. And language. Language is key. Now, everything they'd say to me, pain is temporary. Pride is forever. You are what you do. You are what you eat. Success is habit. Your 6-inch punch, that's your knockout punch. Now come on, throw something off. Don't keep backing up. Advance, defend, protect. The fight, it's in here, not out there. It's not the size of the dog, but it's the fight in the dog. It's leverage and pressure. It's not how tough you are. Don't stop until you're proud of yourself. And that's the beauty of words. Because words empower. Words are freedom. Learned helplessness, it's taught. I mean, you take a wild animal, you put that animal in a cage, that animal becomes domesticated. Or one day you open up the door and say, off you go. But that animal won't step outside because you've taken away its safety net. And it's the same principle when I see a young guy walk into the gym. Now, and oftentimes you lay it out for them. Mate, this is the last stop. And they may have gone through a series of intervention services, social services, before they get to me, but you tell them from this point on, you're no longer a juvenile. Moving forward, you are going to be tried as an adult. And you can show them all success stories, the young guys that have moved into apprenticeships or other vocations. And you can line them up with mentors and all the rest. And if they're not interested, fine. There's the door. Off you go. Or we have a whole network of support and services that are effectively 100% subsidized that can get you where you need to go. 9 times out of 10, they'll say, okay, boss. All good, boss. Leverage and pressure. It's no different to fighting. But that moment, that's the first time that they've had a say in their own life. A light goes on. And that's the first step. Then all you need to do is guide. Get them into apprenticeships, or they want to go in the military, or boxing, MMA, the other vocations, whatever. Wherever they have an interest and some degree of aptitude. It's not rocket science. But it's revelatory to them, as it was to me. And just like you're not someone's priest. You are not their savior. You are not their enabler. You're certainly not their handyman. And men take action. Men are leaders because they have to be, or nothing will get done. I think about things as a boy, I was scared shitless of God as a young boy. I remember this priest, it was a local priest, and he was a big fan of the Old Testament. I really, really dug it. He invested his sermons with real passion and conviction. I really liked his approach. It was really aggressive, and it was all about that tough love. And I always loved the traditional Latin Mass. He was a big fan, lex talionis, the law of retribution. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. I remember I'd get in a fight and he'd get in the middle of it, he'd bust it up. He always asked me, he said, what are you so angry about? I could never think of a reason. But he kept driving the point home, it always came back to forgiveness. He drove that message home, that anger is poison, and anger destroys everything. From his perspective, he saw God's law as not being born from anger, but just a simple case of justice. You commit a mortal sin, then you pay your penance in this life and in the next. He was never very fond of ex-convicts. Guys coming out of jail saying that they found Jesus. Because he saw it as God's decision whether that man will be granted God's deliverance. It wasn't up to that man. He was quite offended by it. He was very hard-headed. He was very old school. Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. He'd tell people, Jesus strapped a crown of thorns and lugged a bloody great big cross across Jerusalem for you ungrateful heathen. He used to say, God's not your doormat. Suffer for God's respect. I remember he never had much time for women. He didn't think very highly of them. He thought they were tools of Satan, to be honest. But his approach was always that men need to break the chains that tie them to the feminine and move towards the masculine, which is the essence of God. That men lead and women follow. And he saw modern women as being an open rebellion against God. And I don't know what he'd make of women today, but he saw the writing on the wall, even back then. Now, I recall he used to quote a saint. He'd say, if a man wants to be certain of the path he walks, He has to close his eyes and walk in the darkness. And that's something I never forgot. I learned a lot from him. It was just simple words and simple logic. And he was very, very funny. He used to see Christians as pagans. He said they may as well go out in the backyard and bang rocks together. And he was a big fan of authority, God's authority. He said without that authority, we're lost. He said that's why there's thousands of denominations looking for scripture to justify their position, rather than using it to show them where they're going wrong. But his main annoyance was that men had lost their ability to lead. And he would be absolutely disgusted by men who couldn't even say no to their own wives. He felt they'd failed as males. Now, as POPtravel said, men have lost their ability to say no. I had an old friend that passed away recently. We used to call him Tucky. He used to tuck his chin in when he fought. He was a good fighter. He'd fight till he was burger in the ring, But then again, most skinny guys do. But there was no quit in him. He had a lot of heart. And of course, it all went out the window when he got smacked out on ice. Now, ice, that's like a purer form of methamphetamine. It's rocket fuel. It'll turn you into a space cadet. And a coward. I think he was using fentanyl by the end of it, and I know he was boosting, but he never forgave. He never forgave. He got stuck. And the trauma, it was like quicksand. Last time I ran into him, we started talking, he started reminiscing. He started getting all weepy, and then he started getting really angry. He was getting angry at his mummy and daddy for what they did to him, and they did a lot to him. But here he is, he's raging at ghosts. And I'm like, mate, I said, they're all dead. Everyone's dead. He said, you've got a point. But he kept going on and on, and he let the tears flow. And I stopped him again, and I asked him, how much is he into? He says he owes so much to XYZ, and he's a nice guy, but he could rub people up the wrong way. And if he wasn't on his last warning, then he'd use them all up by now. So I say he has to dry out, he has to go to rehab, and that's the last thing an addict wants to hear. So he asked me if I can put a word in for him, and I said I'll see what I can do. A lot of people went out of their way to line things up for him, to help him out, but he went off the radar. They found him, but it looked like an OD, but who knows. I was sad about that. Because I had a lot of respect for him when he was younger, He had mean hands, and he'd never back up. He would tear your guts up in the ring. He was like a little Tassie devil. But drugs, they bring a strong man to his knees every time. The question for every man is, what's your drug of choice? Now, I like women with tattoos on their necks. I do. You know the type. Go on. You know. They're my kryptonite, unfortunately. But it's like that Nickelback song. I like your pants around your feet. I like the dirt that's on your knees. I like the way you say please while you're looking up at me. You're like my favourite damn disease. Talk about poor judgment. I haven't been with one of those types in quite some time, but they make my heart pump about 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's like a train wreck. Here, let's unload our trauma off together and poison one another in the same toxic cycle of behaviour as your parents. But some things are just like second nature. It's like a reflex. It's familiar, but the further I get away from all of that, the more I discover what really gives me peace. It makes me content. And you begin to realise that everything else is just self-sabotage. And it's really stuff that should be obvious, but oftentimes it wasn't. And there's a degree or level of knowledge that can only be passed on from man to man, and that's being lost today. Well, maybe it's been lost for quite some time. Parents just unloaded their kids off in front of a TV set. A woman kicking off divorces, the rise of the single mother. Who was it that said it? It was St. Francis, I think. He said you learn to talk by talking, you learn to walk by walking, you learn to work by working, you learn to love by loving. And anyone that tells you otherwise is deceiving you. As a man, you really get nothing from a woman today. I suppose a woman can compliment a man in his life, but most women see men as the enemy today. And the man, he has to lead. Otherwise, it's just a directionless mess. You can't have two leaders in a relationship, especially one with penis envy, and who manipulates a man's desire to provide. Though I can't actually say I ever had that desire personally, but that's not uncommon now. I mean, why would a man provide for a woman that's banged 2 football teams, hates his guts, and plays victim 24/7? Now, as Barbarossa said, and I'm paraphrasing, there's no reason for a bloke to get near a woman other than to get in there and hit it and quit it, because women are so horrible to be around. You know me, I've never had a serious relationship. I've been with women for periods of time, but nothing serious. Maybe it was to them, but really I was just interchangeable. I could have been any guy. It was just what you did. But that was a dynamic between men and women where I came from. It was like a language. It was an established mode of behaviour, and you had to adopt that behaviour because everyone was watching you. They were always looking for signs of you stepping outside of it. And if you did, they cut you down, they'd lay on the guilt and everything else. After all, if they hate their lives, everyone else needs to be miserable too. And once you step outside of that culture or group, things can seem clearer, but they're also very unclear. And maybe there's a mode of behaviour today that's taken shape through all the online and dating apps, but I'm not plugged in, because I resent the very thought of it. The men are not commodities to be traded. A woman, they don't appreciate a man's value, and they never will. It's no wonder women are getting more miserable every year, because they can't recognise or even appreciate a deeper experience of value. It's like a cat chasing its own tail, but they're convinced they can catch it for some reason. And spending time with women now, it's like chewing on tinfoil. Have you ever been laying in bed with a woman post-coital, wishing you were anywhere else? It's difficult being with females today. It's hard to respect them. It's not nigh impossible. And they're painful to be around. It's impossible for them to accept the truth. And they make things far more difficult for themselves than it has to be. And, of course, if men stop bending over backwards for them and stop buying their bathwater, it might help. But, where's the value? Where's the quantifiable return for a man's time and effort? Women receive love. They don't give love. People can be like a disease. Or as Bill Hicks would say, a virus in shoes. They can infect you if you let them. And they'll kill you if you let them. In the words of good old Charlie Bukowski. If you loved me, you would hit me. You ever hear that one? If you haven't, that's a good thing. Imagine thinking that was normal. And I never hit a woman, because I never cared enough to. And, I'm glad that feels strange to say now. I walked away and I kept walking, until I unpacked all of it and realised that mode or way of behaviour was not how other people were. I tell you, it was news for me. And they say that trauma comes in the post. Because I knew a lot of people, men and women, that they held it together for some time. Now others fell into the life early on. They got into addiction, jail, that cycle, but some got out. But it could be just one seemingly minor thing, just drag them back down. But it was all that stuff that they hadn't unpacked. Everyone has a limit. It's sad to see, because everyone has value. Sometimes it's like staring into a broken spirit when you look in their eyes, because they got stuck. I could talk to men and women that I know, that I grew up with, And especially with the women, you know, they were sexually abused at a young age, and it's like they stay at that age. You know, they've regressed, and they just keep inviting the pain in. I know men and women just like that. You know, they're walking around with bright neon targets on their backs. Now, of course, there are extreme cases. A lot of them are addicts or ex-cons. And they look at me and they can't figure me out. You know, because maybe I remind them of something, or they remind me of a distant memory, but you know, a memory I can't recall. I can't recall half of what they say, or what I apparently did, or what we apparently did together. But of course, it's hard to have a coherent conversation with a smackhead. We know what we are, but not what we might be. I should have been a dancer, but I could never get the shit off my shoes. A lot of crap, it weighs people down. A lot of excuses too. Now, I've seen the end result of a lifetime of trauma, and there's a sadness, but you know, I'm a man. You know, I'm not your priest. I'm not a wet blanket to hear your problems. So I take an active approach. You know, I identify the risk, I identify the gaps, and let's get you headed in the right direction. But you can only lead a horse to water. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And seeing pain, I mean, it used to shake me up, but you know, it's kind of like a soldier. You know, soldier sees his first dead body, he falls to his knees and he screams, "Why?" He sees another body, he sheds a tear. He sees another body and he shakes his head. And by the fourth or fifth, he just keeps on walking. And men are resilient, but of course I've known many vets that wrestle with demons. It's kind of inevitable. And there is such a thing as an abdication of responsibility. Now, I've been around veterans. They've helped me with a lot of my stuff. You know, they've opened my eyes to a great deal, and I'm grateful for that. But we've cut our military loose. They're unseen, they're unheard. And the public, they just don't want to know. Many just don't support nor acknowledge them. So we've cut those ties that connect a military to its citizens. Many in the service today, they feel like they've been reduced to mercenaries. And they effectively have. And they've been betrayed by institutions they feel they should have been able to trust. And that is a very hard thing to reconcile for many men today. Because a lot of men are experiencing very much the same thing in a number of ways in regards to a number of different issues. If you're not critical of the military, then you don't respect it. If you're not critical of your country's foreign policy, then you don't understand it. If you're not questioning and critical of all those things and of your government and institutions, and just accept the status quo when you know things are not working, then you are failing the basic fundamental obligations of citizenship. And that's what's missing. We've lost any idea of what citizenship means while we're sending young men off overseas to die on battlefields. Is it really any different when we obscure the truth or turn a blind eye or lie to men about the systemic discrimination males face today and the cost legally and financially of that ignorance? I mean, even down to the basic expectations we place on males. Because the ultimate price you pay for anything in this life is the time you exchange for it. It's not about being right. It's not about getting even. It's about finding meaning, about finding peace, fulfillment. It's about getting unstuck. I'm going to be making more of these off-the-cuff videos like these moving forward. No set time or schedule. It's just about letting the words out. And I think men do need to find their words, you know, especially today. I think there's a beauty in words, no matter how ugly they are, as long as they're coming from the heart.